Adobe Photoshop CC 2016 release. This is Project 5 calendar cover. We are in stage 2, creating a complex mask. You've made a mask before in both Project 1 and Project 2. This is similar to what we've done before, but we're going to make a slightly more complex mask. We're going to start by using the Select Focus Area tool, which is going to allow us to designate how much of the image is selected based on whether or not it's in focus. A little more complex than what we've done before, but it's really not that bad. Now, I'm going to say this. I'm going to say that the instructions in the book are a little misleading. You cannot do step 2 first. I mean, you can, but then cancel it out if you want to look at what it does. We are going to hide everything except for backstage. So hold down your Alt key, click on the eye icon, and that should hide everything except for backstage. Make sure that that is the active layer, or none of this is going to actually work. What we're going to do to begin with is go into the quick mask mode and select that. Go to Channels, double-click Quick Mask to open up the options, and change the opacity. Yours is probably sitting at 100%. Change the opacity to 50% so that we can use this to see what is in focus and what is not. It's going to be a semi-transparent mask, and the color should indicate the mask areas, and say OK to that. Now we're going to go up and select to return to standard mode. Again, back in your layers, make sure your backstage layer is the one that's active, and now go to select and select focus area. In view mode, change this to overlay and collapse that panel again, and you're going to take a look at what you've got. Now, in your parameters, you can override and adjust the automatic calculation, which is what we're working with right now. But you can work with your slider and you can accept more or less, and you can see how it will change by selecting and dragging. For our purposes, we could go with the auto. You could also slide the advanced section, which is for noise levels. And so you can make some adjustments, override what is done. You can also put on some feathering to make edges softer. And for what we're doing right now, we can just go ahead and use what the standard is. We're going to select the Focus Area Add tool, and that's going to paint on the image to add to the current selection, which is similar to the Quick Select tool in the main interface. So what we're going to do is select that, and we want to add our curtain to the selection. Now remember, what we're looking at is we are seeing the area in red that's going to be masked out. We've just added the curtain to the selected area, it's not going to be masked. And we're going to then swap to the remove area and drag across that background because we don't want that part in. And it might take more than one swipe to do that. So the software is going to identify areas that touch each other that have similar focus. Now at this point, you're probably going to need to move your tools around, maybe collapse some things so that you can check to make sure that everything is selected that needs to be selected and deselected that needs to be deselected. At the bottom of the dialog box, output to new layer with layer mask. And when you're satisfied with what you've got, after you've painted in, added, and subtracted, say OK. Now when you go to your layers, you're going to see that there is a backstage and a backstage copy, and the backstage copy has a mask added to it. You're going to refine the mask. Click on the mask thumbnail. Make sure that that's highlighted so it's got the little white corners around it. And you're going to refine that by painting around the areas to clean up the edges. This is probably a good place to save before you continue on. Nice stopping point just to make sure that you've got something saved. And then we're going to paint and erase in the mask. You're going to pick up a paintbrush and select a brush that is a hard brush, and about 50 pixels should be about right. We want to make sure we have a 100% opacity with a flow of 100%, and you can zoom in onto your image, and you're going to paint on the mask. Make sure that you have the default colors of black and white. Black is going to paint out, okay? When you change to white, it's going to paint in. So here I just painted out at those spots that we could see and make sure that that's nice and clean. You can actually go into channels and you can turn on your layer mask so that you can see the area. See how I'm painting in and painting out? You can paint on the mask, and black will fill in the mask and white will delete areas. Or if you're not painting on the mask on the channels, if you're painting on the layer and painting on the mask itself, and let me turn off that and go back to the layer, on here you're going to be painting with black and white again. Black will mask, I'm going to undo that, and white will reveal. So you can work in either mode, whatever you're more comfortable with. And let me zoom in, but you can see how these edges are very rough, and we want to clean all of that up. So you can pick whichever mode you prefer to work with. On this instance, it might be easier to work in the channels, but I can now come in here and I can paint, and you can adjust the size of your brush so that you can do detail work. But we can start by going over here and cleaning up the edge on the curtain. Oh, and I did that backwards. Let me change my color from black to white, and I can just run down the edge of the curtain, and I can clean my edge up and give me a much neater edge on that curtain. If I've painted in too much, see how I'm picking up some of the white? If you press your X key, you're going to swap back and forth between the colors, and I can paint that out again. But doing this is going to neaten up my edges, and I wobbled a little bit there, so I'm going to bring that back simply by painting. It's a nice non-destructive way to clean things up. Oh, here's a piece under here I want to get rid of. So let me again swap my brush, and I need to chew a little bit off from here. And if I accidentally take too much, all I have to do is go back in and swap and paint back. Now remember, we are working in the mask. We can go in and change our opacity back down to 50% so that you can see what's coming through. Because this is a different mask, it did not hold the 50% in. And make sure that my edge, I seem to have a soft edge. Let me get my edge harder again. Oh, bigger brush, but I need a hard edge so that it works better. And again, I can come in. It takes a little practice, but you can come back in And if we go back into the layers and reveal the backstage layer, come to channels, turn this on, you can actually see what's going on behind there. And by changing the brush size, you can come in and paint. Oops. I can come in here and I can paint in to reveal or out to conceal. Bring in all of the pieces of her crown. Paint out the background areas. And really get this all cleaned up very nicely. Remember, using your shortcut keys, you can use your closing brackets and opening brackets to change the size of your brush. I just painted out the wrong thing. And work on this and clean up as much as you can, and I'll leave you to your work, and I'm going to clean this up as best I can. Once you have gotten everything the way that you like it, make sure that everything is good. You can turn all of your layers back on again, and you're going to grab the logo type layers and pull those down between the backstage layer and the backstage copy layer. And you can see the curtain runs over the top and her crown comes over the top of the text. Zoom in and take a look at what you've got. The foreground areas should show a pretty clean area. If you're not happy with it, you can go back in, select the backstage copy again, and using the brush, go in and refine that edge. Clean that up a little bit. If you discover that you maybe didn't take enough of something or you took too much, you still can go back in and you can still add and subtract what you selected. Because remember, you did this using a layer mask. Now make sure that that layer mask is selected, and in the Properties panel, add a 2-pixel feather to the mask edge. It's a very small amount of blur that you're adding, but it's going to minimize the real sharp, harsh edges where everything overlaps, because you don't want to have those little hard pixels. You might even take it down a little bit smaller depending on what your area is. So between a 1 and 2 pixel feather is going to soften those edges and still be nice and clean. And now it's a good time to save and go on to the next stage of your project.